My name is John Sheldon, and if you are visiting the Beyond Belief Sobriety YouTube channel for the first time, this is a podcast that explores secular options to recovery from addictions of all kinds. We post audio podcasts that are available pretty much anywhere you like to download your podcast episodes, but you can find them on Apple Podcasts, you can find them on Amazon, Spotify, almost any place. We also post video versions of those episodes, and we do video only episodes like we're doing today. And I'm particularly excited about the episode that we have here today. We're going to be exploring, this is going to be a weekly series where we're going to be exploring smart recovery in detail. To inform people about the options available in SMART for recovery, and just to learn about it. And it'll be good for me to learn about it too. And my guest, and who will be doing these episodes with me, is Arthur Shenker, and he has been involved with SMART really from the beginning. He is also a national outreach liaison. He probably knows more about SMART than anybody I've ever met, and he's just the perfect guest. We had him back on episode 220. So if you want to learn more about Arthur and a little bit about SMART and what we talked about in that episode, check it out. It's episode 220. But Arthur, thank you for being here. It's so good to have you. How you doing today?
Very well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here with you.
Yep. And you are also a Missourian. You're in St. Louis, aren't you?
I'm in St. Louis. You're in Kansas City.
Kansas City. Yep. Yep. And I swear to God, I'm gonna drive across the state one of these days and see you guys. Are you doing your meetings in person yet?
No, I had the option. I had the option of doing them back in person. There are some groups here that are doing it in person, but I tend to get some people from not only throughout the country, but every now and then somebody from England or somebody from Canada, and you can't do that in person.
No.
So I decided that instead of using a smaller room that can only hold so many,
right,
I can get a lot more on a screen.
Yep. Yep. I bet your meetings have done really well.
A lot more diversity by having it.
Yep, that's nice. I bet your meetings are doing really well since so many things have gone online. SMART was already ahead of the curve anyway with a web page that's completely devoted to online meetings that they've had for forever, for all I know. So you guys have always been doing these online meetings. It wasn't any big deal for you to shift over to that, was it?
No, because we have. There's two ways to find meetings. One is called find a meeting, find your local meeting. And that's when you plug in like a zip code, and you can go with a 50-mile radius or a 100-mile radius. It'll tell you when those meetings are, whether they're online, on Zoom, whether they're in person, or if it's a hybrid meeting both, because that some people are doing that. Then there's Smart Recovery that is online, period.
Right.
And there's about 7, 8, maybe 9 a day. But they are divided up into, some of them are for teens, some of them are for family and friends, some of them are tool time, some of them are discussion. Those meetings can get 75 to 150, sometimes 200 people in them. And and that's been there for quite a while. The other ones I was talking about have came along more because of the COVID in the pandemic.
Yeah, they were meetings that were meeting physically that now had to move online. Yep. Yeah. Interesting phenomenon. So, this episode is going to be our first of a series. So we're going to kind of free flow it for a little bit. But why don't we start, if you don't mind, Arthur, by just kind of introducing people to SMART who might not be familiar with it.
Okay. Well, SMART is actually an acronym, and SMART stands for, and there's two ways of saying it. One of them is self-management and recovery training, or self-management addiction recovery training.
Oh, I never heard that.
So Joe Gerstein, who's our founding president, likes to use the addiction in the middle. On the website, it says "and." So, but you know what? Both are applicable. So it doesn't really make any difference which way you look at it. And the idea of that is to empower people to make better choices in their lives.
Yeah.
And we do that by using different sciences. And the real easy definition of what smart recovery is what we want to do is we want to help people clarify their thinking so they can make better choices and therefore eliminate certain bad behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And Smart Recovery has there are 4 points to Smart Recovery that we should probably talk about.
Okay. The 4 points of Smart Recovery is building and maintaining motivation. Second one is coping with urges.
Mm-hmm.
Third one is managing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the fourth one is living a balanced life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, funny enough, when all this started, there was only 2 points to the program.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was coping with urges and managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Really? How about that?
So point 2 and 3 were the only ones that were there.
Okay.
So, but what they figured out eventually is that if you don't have adequate motivation,
mm-hmm.
the motivation is what takes you to want to do something about your life and to change something in your life.
Right.
And if that motivation isn't there, I don't know any program that really works.
Exactly.
If the motivation is there, then there's a really good possibility and chance that you are going to find what you're seeking, which is a recovery.
And you know what's kind of unique about SMART, in my opinion, I'm familiar with the 12-step model, and what's unique about SMART is that you actually have tools that help people recognize that help people get motivated. Because in a 12-step program, it's you got to hit bottom. If you haven't hit bottom, you're not going to be motivated. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, the question really is, what do you consider bottom? Do you have to live under a bridge?
It can be pretty bad, yeah.
To find that motivation,
right?
Or can it be that your bottom just may be, I've just had enough.
I've had enough. I want to change something in my life.
I want to change something in my life. It doesn't mean you have to live under a bridge. It doesn't mean you have to be homeless.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you don't have a job.
Right.
You may have all those things,
mm-hmm.
and yet, what drugs or alcohol or gambling or eating disorders or any of the other maladaptive behaviors really interfered with your life
mm-hmm.
and caused problems that would not be there if you could change them.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I'd like to know what the definition of bottom is.
I know it's different. And what's really bad is if someone does go out, the thinking is, oh, they weren't ready yet. They haven't hit bottom. But anyway,
well, some programs say you haven't hit enough of a bottom.
Right.
Some programs say if you don't do certain things, you're not at a point where you're really, I've heard expressions like a dry drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what a dry drunk is.
Right.
The guy who created rational recovery, which was a precursor to SMART,
right,
is a guy named Jack Trimpey.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack used to say, Jack was asked, the question is, when do you become a non-alcoholic? And Jack's answer was, when you quit drinking, you are no longer an alcoholic.
Thank God. I like that.
Okay, so that's basically where it all started.
Right.
With Jack back in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
And he was a pretty bright fellow.
Yep.
And it grew from there. SMART grew from that.
And I like to think about recovery as a process of change, and SMART recovery, if I understand this right, Arthur, is really based on those 4 principles of SMART. Aren't they based on that psychological model of the process of change?
Well, it's based on cognitive behavioral psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Is, if you want to put it right where it's at. Albert Ellis created rational motive behavioral therapy in the 1950s,
mm-hmm.
which we still use some of the tools from that,
mm-hmm.
The ABCs, they call them. And then it went to Aaron Beck in the 1960s with cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is really where it's at. It's changing again, like I said earlier, the mindset.
Right.
And in the way to look at things. It's like the fellow driving down the street. He's late or she's late to get someplace, and all the lights start turning red on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can either think, that light, it knows me.
Mm-hmm.
It sees me coming. It knows I'm late. And there it is. It turned red on me again. well, does the light really know you? Is it really personal?
Right.
So it's taking thoughts of that. Why is this happening to me? To it's not really happening to me. It's happening to many other people around you at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
So is it really personal?
Mm-hmm.
And changing that mindset. And that's just one example of what we want to help people do.
Yep.
Some ways we do that is by using vocabulary exchanges.
Mm.
Like, for instance, if you go into the cognitive distortions, one of them is the should statements. Like, if I should have done this, I should have done that,
Mm-hmm.
and words like must, ought tos, and have tos are similar offenders.
Mm-hmm.
It's that if we could change those and not look at it that way. When a person starts saying, I need to,
Right.
it's like and since it's like just after fall, you have a backyard full of leaves. Somebody says, your backyard is full of leaves.
Right.
And you go, well, I need to rake those up. What's that mean? What do you think it means?
Oh, it just means that you're contemplating the idea that there's some sort of change that needs to be made.
Right, but you're not ready to do it.
But you're not ready to rake the leaves.
Because you're saying, I need to do it, which is futuristic.
Right. You're thinking about that. That's what I was thinking about, the stages of change. So that
and that's where we go. Exactly.
You're in that contemplative mode that, those leaves are looking pretty bad. Or, I'm getting thrown in jail a lot.
Oh, yeah. Or I got get a couple of DUIs. Or my job's at risk. Or,
right.
Or my wife is going to leave me, or my husband's going to leave me.
Mm-hmm. And these things start going through your mind, and you start, but you're not really ready to do anything about it. You're not really ready to take any steps to make any change. But there are ways, to help people get through that.
Yeah, there are. And again, it's the way we view it. There's, and I have trouble sometimes with the name. A old Greek philosopher, Epictetus, once said, it's not the problems that are a problem, it's the way we view the problems.
Okay.
Okay. So it's really that it all comes down to how you see it.
Right.
And what your perception is of it. If you view a problem, you got this bill in the mail. Oh my God, what do I do now? And you start going, I shouldn't have spent the money. I shouldn't have done that. Well, maybe you could just make a call and just take care of that.
Right.
You see what I mean? So it's how you view it and how you react to it.
Right.
Is the big thing.
Okay.
So part of that is like what we call unconditional life acceptance.
Yeah.
You want to, so we have three acceptances: unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance. That one I just gave an example of is when this falls under the unconditional life acceptance.
Right.
Unconditional other is somebody says something to you. You have no control over what they say. You have no control over what their action is. But what you do have control over is how you receive it and how you react to it.
Right.
So the locus of control always comes from within. And that's the difference of our program, because in other programs, they say that locus of control is not within. It's an outside entity.
Right. Some external force.
And
force. That really does cause a problem for some people, which is really what got this podcast going, is because there's a large group of people for whom the 12-step model was the only one, but had a problem with having to rely on a higher power. Particularly, I think that people that are much younger than me had more of an issue with that because the language of needing a higher power and the whole idea of just wasn't jiving with them. That whole idea of being powerless and everything. People need to feel enabled to make changes in their lives. So I wonder if we could talk about what a meeting is like. What can
before we go there, I want to comment on what you just were saying, because it's really important, because bottom line is that no matter how you believe, meaning if you even believe in that external force,
right?
Okay, let's say you believe in that external force, that external force has some impact on you,
right?
who still makes the bottom line choice?
Right.
You do.
Right.
It's that you still make that decision whether I want to drink or not drink.
Right.
Whether I want to use drugs, not use drugs. Whether I want to eat that second donut or not eat that second donut. Whether I want to play that extra $10 or $20 or $100 and when I gamble. You're still the bottom line choice maker.
Right.
No matter what that external force may be. Now there are people that don't understand. Like I was doing a group once for a inpatient group, and I had one person when we were asking questions, and I was asking certain questions. He says, "When I want to use, I don't have a choice."
Mm.
Those are his exact words. When I want to use, I don't have a choice. And my answer was, you saying that is a choice. That he chose not to have that choice.
Right. Right.
You see, it's still a choice.
Right. And something else I should probably mention too is SMART doesn't like go out of its way to be secular. It just is because it's based on science. And it doesn't mean that a person can't have religious beliefs or incorporate those in their recovery at all. It just means
it doesn't.
Not at all. And that's what I like about it. See, I was involved for a long time, and we can talk about this a little bit later too, in AA, but in a secular branch of it. So we were going out of our way to be secular because the rest of the AA world was not secular. SMART doesn't have to worry about that. It just is what it is.
And again, it's written, there are probably hundreds of books, maybe thousands, written on cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Bottom line is, it still comes down to that it's figure out ways to make better choices, figure out ways to look at things in a different light.
Right.
So they all bottom line basically to that.
Right.
Maybe there are different ways to get there. Different doctors or psychologists and psychiatrists may have different methods of getting you to that place. But that's basically what it is. It's changing the way you think.
Right.
Reframing the thinking.
Right.
It's amazing how certain of our tools really take you there. The motivation, as I said, is very important. When we do these groups and we say, what are 3 things that you think would be really good to have in order to get into a good recovery? And the first one is motivation.
Yep.
The second one is motivation. What do you think the third one is?
Don't tell me it's motivation.
Motivation. So if you have that motivation, and one of the ways we look at that motivation is I might ask somebody, if I take you back 6 months ago or a year ago, and I ask you, what was your motivation to make changes from 0 to 10? What would be your answer? And sometimes you hear 0, sometimes you hear 1, 2, maybe 3. And sometimes if I hear 3, I might say, why so high? Because they were probably still doing their maladaptive behavior.
Okay.
And then I say, how about today as we're sitting here? Where's that number today?
Right.
The average we hear is 7.5 to 8. But sometimes you hear 9, especially people in treatment centers. When you deal with them, it's like definitely like 9, 10 you hear a lot. And then we have a tool. They said, let me see. If for those people, by the way, they say 7.5 and 8, and even 9. We have a tool that maybe can raise their motivation even a little bit more.
Right. I wonder if people caught when they were listening to you, there's a real big difference in the language. But you talked about maladaptive behaviors. That is so different because you see, with SMART recovery, you can have, it doesn't matter if your problem is drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, shopping, any behavior. Is that right, Martha? Any behavior you want to change, SMART will work, and you're welcome.
Absolutely. Because we actually find that the same underlying condition that's causing that is similar. It's just that your choice of how you act out with it is different.
Right.
But the bottom line is that, it's funny because when I do meetings, I don't look for the differences in people or their really their behaviors. I look for the similarities.
Okay.
Yep. And bring it down to, because you might get somebody in a room that's full of people that came in because they had a problem with alcohol. And you might have one person that comes in and says, my problem is totally different. My problem is gambling. And when you take them through these scenarios, they figure out that the risk or the cost of what they're doing are identical.
Exactly. And the way out is the same. The steps that you take, the stages that you go through, the tools that you use are all the same. And essentially that's what you're going to be talking about. And I wonder if this might be a good way to segue into what can a person expect when they go to their first SMART recovery meeting?
Okay. What the way the meetings are done is, the first thing we do, if we have somebody new there, I always ask the question, how'd you find out about us? What brings you here? Now, I like to use a lot of levity in my meetings, because I find that if we can get some laughter going somehow, that it kind of relaxes the person and empties the mind, so they can take in more information. It's kind of a form of mindfulness.
Yeah.
And so if I ask, I say, one, how'd you find out about us? And then I ask the second question, what brought you here? And somebody says alcohol. And I'm going to say, wow, you're not going to find any here. So kind of get them into a different mindset. That the alcohol was a problem that they had somewhere else. We're not going to bring it here. You see, you're not going to find it in here, in this room.
Now, something that else is unique, we should probably explain to anyone who's not familiar with SMART. The reason that Arthur is doing this, he is actually the facilitator of the meeting. And that's something that's unique. So when you go to a SMART meeting, there's someone there who's been trained and is knowledgeable with the SMART recovery tools and knows what to look out for to help people the very best that they can. And that's what you are. You're a SMART facilitator.
Right. And I'm also just recently I've been promoted, and they quadrupled my salary. And since I'm a volunteer, the salary is basically the same. It has more zeros, but no digits.
I was wondering.
But National Outreach Liaison, because I do deal with different treatment centers and calling different places around the country to familiarize them with.
Oh, that's great, Arthur. Recovery. That's great.
So yeah, it's like I have a full-time job. I don't think I've ever. I think I made a lot of money working a lot less.
Right.
Back in the day.
Right.
But I'm working a lot more for a lot less today.
Yeah, I think that you'd be good at that.
When I say a lot less, I'm talking about financial. It's not a financial thing.
No.
You do this because of a desire to want to help others.
Yeah.
Sure. And kind of help them along the way. But the nice thing in SMART recovery is, one of the things that we're based on. There's three basic that I started. I said two of them earlier. There's three basic therapies we use. One is that cognitive behavioral psychology or therapy. Other is rational emotive behavioral therapy, different tools from that, from else. Third one is called motivational enhancement therapy. And the way we do that is by ask those who, what, why, where, and how questions, open-ended.
Right.
You get people to talk about things, and they end up seeing what their problem is themselves. That's the whole idea. Again, motivational. You hear that word is in there.
Right.
That you're motivating them to realize what's going on within them. Instead of you telling them what's wrong, you're letting them figure it out.
Right. So a person shows up at a SMART recovery meeting. What's the format like?
Okay, the format is, the first thing we do is we do what they call a check-in. Now, some facilitators, you're going to find there's differences in different meetings. Even though we have basically a set way that we were trained to do, every facilitator, I think, works a little bit differently. Some of them go right exactly by the way it is. Some of us do things a little bit differently. I'm one of those people that does it a little bit differently. My whole meeting is basically a check-in meeting.
Oh.
So the first thing we do is a check-in. Now, with some meetings, they say 2 or 3 minutes, tell us what's been going on this last week or week and a half, because we don't deal and really delve into the past.
Right.
What we want to do is find out what happened between the last meeting and this meeting, and then move forward. Now, and then a topic may appear that's in that meeting. And a lot of facilitators will write down that topic, And when they get through with the check-in, they go back to the topic and start dealing with some of those things that they wrote down. In my particular meetings, when somebody has an issue, I stop right there and we deal with that issue with that person.
Right.
So that's why I call my meetings check-in meetings, because I could have 18 people in the room. And when they're checking in, so there could be a group of a certain number of them that may say, man, last week was great. Everything's working well. You move on. Then there might be somebody that said, I really struggled last week. I had this issue. I really thought of drinking, or I drank.
Mm-hmm.
And let's examine that. So we stop and we examine that.
Right.
Our meetings are discussion groups. I bring other people into that same discussion.
Which is very different from a lot of, like, what if you're used to a 12-step meeting, this is going to be different because you're going to be engaging with the other people in the room. The crosstalk is encouraged.
And feedback is important, vital.
Yep.
And another thing about it is, you'll never hear a facilitator use any stigmatizing language.
Okay.
And there's no judgment.
Okay.
And we never give advice.
Right.
We give suggestions. So somebody asked me once, what's the difference between a suggestion and advice? Aren't they the same thing? And my answer was pretty simply, well, no, it's not. I said, I'll tell you who gives advice. Lawyers give advice. Doctors give advice.
Mm-hmm.
Accountants give advice.
Right.
Okay. Professionals give advice. I said, a policeman, when he's reading you the rights, said, I advise you of your rights.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're correct.
You never, have you ever heard a policeman say, I'm going to suggest that these are your rights?
Right. Correct.
Okay. So a suggestion usually comes from people that aren't professionals.
Right. Right.
And because we're not,
right.
Even though a good number of facilitators may be
some
therapists,
mm-hmm. They're not acting in that role in a SMART
They're not
meeting.
acting in that role when they're a facilitator.
Yep. Now, tell me this. Is it important to be a peer? Is it important to actually have actual lived experience with some sort of a problem behavior to be a facilitator?
No.
That's interesting.
No, because again, you could have a professional that had, it would be like the same ish thing. And I don't know if we ever talked about that before.
I don't know.
But if you went to a cardiologist and you had a heart condition and you had to have a surgery, do you ask the doctor, did you ever operate on yourself and did you have surgery?
Right.
And he said, no, I've never had a heart condition. I never had surgery. Does that mean he can't work on you?
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is, no, you really don't have to be. We find that a lot of people have gone through a recovery.
Sure.
Even a lot of people that are in the field professionally, you find have gone through a recovery, but there's many that haven't.
Right. Right. And it's natural because it kind of becomes a kind of a passion, I guess, for someone like for you and me, for example, both in long-term recovery and still involved, in some way. We were talking about that a little bit.
I'm going to stop you again, if you don't mind, because I don't look at, I say long-term recovery, but I'm not continuing with long-term recovery. When I introduce myself, I say, I want you to listen very carefully to what I say.
Okay.
And I say, I am in my 30th year of being recovered.
Okay.
From an addictive behavior.
Right. See, this is important language, and the language of recovery is so different. And I've been having these thoughts go through my head. First of all, I like that SMART I don't have to introduce myself as an alcoholic.
No.
I haven't drank in 33 years. I like that idea that if I'm not drinking, I'm not practicing that problem behavior. Are there other things in my life that I want to work on and need help with? Sure. And also that recovery process. Do I want to be in recovery for the rest of my life? I don't know. I guess I like to grow as a human being, but who doesn't?
Okay. So let's take the word recovery.
Okay.
Okay. You have some programs that say you are always in recovery. Once an addict, always an addict.
Right.
Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic.
Right.
Okay. We don't look at it that way. We look at it differently. But let's take that one word. If you lost, let's say somebody stole jewelry from you or robbed your house, and you go to the police, they're going to do whatever they can to recover your belongings.
Right.
Right.
But once they get them,
they give them back to you.
Right.
But they go out to recover them.
They do.
Okay. If you didn't make a payment on your car, to a couple of months,
Yep. They take it.
They have a recovery service that goes out and takes your car away.
Yep. I used to do that back in the old days.
Let's say you have an illness, an actual illness. Mm-hmm. You recover from it.
Right.
Okay.
You get back to your health.
You get exactly. So point is that there's a lot of different ways of using that particular word, mm-hmm. and depending on the context of it, mm-hmm. Is it, and we don't get into the discussion, which leads us into this, of whether it's a disease, a disorder, or a behavior.
Right.
Because some programs insist on saying it's a disease and that's what talks to you and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Well, we don't get into that discussion because we say it doesn't matter which one you believe. You still have a choice.
Right.
That's where that choice still comes in.
Right.
It doesn't matter which one you believe.
Right.
So.
Yep. And I agree with that. So I was telling you, so let's talk a little bit about the series that we plan on doing and your ideas behind it, because this really is your idea. But I was telling you that this came along at a really good time in my life. I'm really at a point where I'm finding myself kind of growing out of the 12-step model. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate it or think it's valuable. It helped me a lot for a long time. But for whatever reason, I'm ready to move on and do something else. And I've noticed that there was a certain period of grieving that I went through, to be honest with you, or mourning, of recognizing that I'm no longer the person I used to be. That's no longer my focus or interest. I have other interests. And I've learned how to shift my thinking now to that. I still value this. I can still talk about this. I have a lot of expertise and experience in it. If somebody wants to know how to do 12 steps and looking at it through a secular way, I can help them with that. But just as a human being, I need to move on and engage my brain a little bit differently than I have all this time. So recently I've dropped out of all these 12-step Facebook groups, these secular Facebook groups. I was sick and tired of all the talk about religion, no religion, AA is good, AA is bad. It was just too much for me. And it started feeling like a job, to be honest with you. And I was just feeling overwhelmed. So that's where I was at. And you came along with this idea, and I'm familiar with SMART. I went through the training, the facilitator training. I probably need to do it again. And I've only been to a handful of meetings. And I just thought, this is great timing. This is really kind of what I need right now to explore something other than what I've known all my life and to learn something new. And I think that not only will it help me, but that curiosity will help other people who learn about something like this that they might not have heard of before.
One way also for you to actually learn a little bit more about how, what's done in a meeting and all that. How far away are you from Lawrence?
Oh, I'm real close to it. It's like 30 minutes away, 40 minutes maybe.
Okay. So you're within a 50-mile radius. Mm-hmm. Okay. And of course you have a computer.
I do.
And you're online. Okay. So we have a Dr. Bruce Lease, who is in the psychology department at Kansas University.
At KU? At KU.
In Lawrence.
Okay.
He actually has gotten the grant to train facilitators.
I'll be damned.
And he does a meeting on Zoom.
Oh, really?
What? Now, this is a psychologist. He just got through. Their book just came out, which would be the last collaboration between an outside person like Dr. Lease, who's extremely bright, and Aaron Beck.
Oh, really?
Who is the creator of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh.
And psychology. And Aaron Beck just died November 1st. The book was finished just within this last few months, 6 months. And it finally went out on to be sold.
Okay.
So you're talking about a guy that really knows his stuff.
Okay.
And it would be interesting for you to just get on one of his meetings.
I would love that.
And then another person would be to get on a meeting with me, get on a meeting with Joe Gerstein.
Yep.
The nice thing about with some of these Zoom meetings is that you could be anywhere in the country.
Yeah, that is nice.
Or anywhere in the world.
Yep.
And get on.
And when we start doing these series going forward, we can invite these people to come on with us.
And they would be, Joe would love to do this.
This is exciting. This is exciting for me.
Yeah, and Joe, to remind everybody, Joe was a clinical assistant professor of medicine at Harvard.
Okay.
He was also an MD, a retired MD. Obviously, if you're a professor of medicine, you better be an MD.
I guess so.
Very successful, and he is the creator of Smart Recovery, and loves to come on programs like this to talk about the creation of where we're going. We do a lot of things now, working into getting into different institutions, whether they be Federal Bureau of Prisons or whether they be state prisons or county jails or city jails, to do our programs there. We have programs that are for people that are incarcerated and coming into a reentry program.
How's that coming along? I know that there were a lot of SMART meetings in VA centers, but how's it coming along? Are you expanding very well with that?
Yeah, we are. That's part of what I do. We're now looking to get into sober homes in rural counties. Okay. And reentry programs from people coming that are incarcerated. As I said, we have several different, like you have a regular SMART handbook, which has all of our tools in it.
Right.
Then you have a family and friends book, which is our version, a cognitive version of Al-Anon. Yep. It's a way of looking at that is secular and deals with science.
Right.
Then we have for the people that are in different jail systems, like for instance, we have something called Inside Out. That would be a 24-week program that has homework for people that are incarcerated. For people that might be in a jail, either waiting for a sentence or a short-term sentence, we have Inside Out Fast, which was created by a fellow that came out of jail, Dr. Barry Grant, who got a degree in psychology after he served his time, and then condensed the Inside Out program to a 12-week program. So for people that are in a shorter term. Then we have two entrepreneurs out of Houston, Texas, that created a book that we now use in those systems of reentry called Successful Life Skills. And that teaches a person how to interview for a job, get a job, keep a job, and shows them easy finance, and also has some of the SMART tools in it if they happen to be found that they had some addictive behaviors when they created their crime.
That's fantastic.
Doesn't mean that their crime was from an addictive behavior. Right. It means they're probably under the influence maybe when they created it.
Okay.
So we have a lot of different programs that we're doing now. If you go to some of the other places or different programs, their program is basically the same program whether you're out in wherever you are. But ours actually have differences.
Do you, I hate to go back to this, but I'm kind of curious. Do you happen to have the title of that book? And can you spell that doctor's name? Is it L-E-E-S-E? Is it Dr. Liese?
Dr. Liese, L-I-E-S-E.
L-I-E-S-E.
It could be L-E-I-S-E.
Right.
I could have that wrong. But it's Dr. Bruce Liese.
Okay. I'm just Googling them. Perfect. Came up. Okay.
Got him?
I got him. I'm going to check it out. I definitely want to go to one of those meetings. I want to read that book too. So
yeah, it just went out on sale, and as I said, it's Aaron Beck's last collaboration. I think he was about 100 years old.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I think it was like 99 or something.
And he was the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, which started in the 50s, right?
Oh, 60s.
1960s. Okay.
Yeah, the 50s was Albert Ellis with
that's right.
rational emotive behavioral therapy.
Gotcha. Right. Okay. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, and the rational emotive behavioral therapy, it's funny how they're similar but different. The similarity is in the rational emotive behavioral therapy, it's you're rational, your thought process, right? Your way you think influences the emotive, the way you feel, which influences your behavior.
Okay.
So they're an influence. Each one is an influence. In cognitive behavioral therapy, they're basically saying that your thought process can induce a behavior or a choice to use. So they're very, very similar. And it's funny because a lot of people that were in treatment and going to a group therapy and all that, there's a paper that says, how are you feeling today? And it has like about 25 or 30 different faces with different emotions underneath each one. Well, I have a piece of paper that underneath it says, what were you thinking to make you feel this way? because most of everything starts with a thought.
Yeah, true.
And if we can, and that's what we focus on. So the way I look at our meetings too, to get back to that, is if you are in a group therapy in a treatment center or just in group therapy, let's say an intensive outpatient, so et cetera, they have what they call process groups. And what they want to do is process people's feelings. Right?
Right.
Well, so let's say our groups are kind of similar as a process group, except that we want to process the thinking, which creates the feelings.
Interesting.
Yep. You know, and that's the way I look at it.
You're right. So tell me, as we start,
I don't want to say that's written anywhere for SMART recovery, but that's just the way I see it.
I see. Okay. So tell me, Arthur, what do you envision? What would you like to see us do going forward on this project? We're going to be doing weekly videos focusing on SMART. For example, where do we begin? What do you want to talk about next week? Where do you see this going down the road?
What I see is that one, have different guests who have different perspectives, because again, being based on science, you're going to get people that have a little bit different take and perspectives on things. It's funny because if you get Joe and I in the same room, Joe Gerstein and I in the same room, we both have the exact same bottom line. Joe may have a more clinical way of expressing it, and I have a more down-to-earth way of expressing it, a little bit different way, because I don't have that clinical experience.
Right.
Okay? My experience is practical. And his experience is not only practical, but it can be clinical.
Correct. Right.
So where he can really talk about the differences of the different parts of the brain, and talk about how the hippocampus and the hypothalamus and the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala kind of are circuited, and then talk about the circuits. I can just say, hey, we have the prefrontal cortex. It makes decisions. If we're drinking, that decision making is not there.
Right.
So I may say it differently, but it's the same. But we say the same thing.
Right.
So you might get a different take, and that's what's nice about being able to explore with different people in the way they look at it, the way their experience is taken. We have different tools for different things. Like, for instance, and you brought this up a little bit earlier, you say you want to see different ways in the secular way of doing things. A lot of the tools we use, you can use in everyday life.
Right.
One of the tools we have is a cost-benefit analysis, and another version of that is called a risk-reward. So let's go over it real quick if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, cost-benefit analysis, first box, top left, is benefits of using. It doesn't matter what you're using, but benefits of using. The second box on the right is cost of using. Then the bottom left is the benefits of not using, or let me see, the benefits of not using, and then the cost of not using.
Right.
Okay. So, now costs are actual costs, what it cost you. Now, if you do a risk reward, the first box on the top left is the risks of using, as opposed to the benefits. And the risks are not only those things that have happened, but those things that could happen. Just because the guy next to you had a DUI doesn't mean you have had one yet.
Right.
That doesn't mean you won't get one if you continue on. Right. Or if the person that on the other side of the table had a diagnosis of cirrhosis of the liver, you may not have gotten there yet, but you're at risk of getting there.
Yeah.
So we put down those risks. Like you hit a golf ball over a pond, over a lake. The risk is I don't hit it far enough, it's going to go in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can have a reward and knock it right on over where I have a better shot to the green.
Right.
Okay. So we look at those risks, what could happen, what have happened, and what could happen. So there's a difference. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because in real life, not that long ago, I remember the Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State. Oh, look at that. We have a new participant.
She was jumping on the device I used to record this thing, and I was afraid she was going to turn it off. That's not good, Luna.
Well, that's a bright cat. That's a cool cat. Anyway, but I heard like our Secretary of State, when they were going through the withdrawal, I don't want to bring in politics, but
Right.
withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Right.
And he's on the air and he goes, what we did was a risk benefit
right.
analysis.
Right.
Wow. We do that in our groups,
exactly.
But you can use our tools in real life.
Right.
For other things. You want to change jobs. You want to change careers. What would be the benefits of doing that? What would be the cost of doing that? Right? What would be the benefits of staying? What would be the cost of staying?
Yeah.
So you can actually break that down and use those kind of tools.
Sure. Yeah, we use them in business. I when I got my MBA.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And yet we use those tools for addictive behaviors.
Right. And it works well because,
sure,
as you say, you there are benefits to using, but we
wouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm. There's a cost to using. There's a benefit to not using, and a reward, I guess, for not using.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a cost, I guess, for not using, right?
You
can balance it all out.
Well, it doesn't really balance.
No.
That's the whole point, is if you put down the cost of using.
Right.
One, it's usually long-term costs.
Right.
Okay. It can cost you your whole family. It can cost you your job. It can and that's long-term.
Right.
The rewards of using, I put another word in front now. Perceived rewards or perceived benefits. Okay, I added a word to it. Now, the reason I added that word to it is we think of benefits as being that this is going to really benefit me.
Mm.
But one, it's usually a short-term benefit. And two, may not really reach what you're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a lady once that said, when she had a relapse, she said, I was looking for that euphoria that I got when I first started years back.
Yeah.
I said, did you find that? She said, no, it just took me right down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say it could be a perceived reward.
Mm.
The costs are real.
Mm. Right.
The rewards may not be that real.
Right. You might think you're going to get something, but you, in fact, don't.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I put that word perceived in there.
Yeah.
It's more realistic way. And those rewards are short term.
They are. Yeah.
They're not long term.
No.
What happens the next day? You wake up, if it's alcohol, you wake up, you're hungover, you're drunk. Sometimes you black out, you don't remember anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And the costs are long term, but any reward you get from it is not, for sure. It's very short lived.
And if you can go from the costs down to the rewards of not, or the benefits of not using, you can almost draw a line and say that those costs can now become rewards of not using.
Mm-hmm.
That you might be able to reverse some of those, if not all of them.
Okay. So
does that make sense?
It does make sense. Have you given any thought to what we might want to talk about next week?
Wherever you want to go, my friend, I think that we can talk about some more in depth about some of these tools.
Yeah, that sounds good. That might be a good idea, just to kind of start with some of the tools and just kind of go over those. I can send you an email and maybe we can kind of.
And I think what would really be a good idea is I'm going to invite Joe to join us next Saturday for this.
Okay.
And the reason I want to invite him is he's the fellow, because we've talked about in the last time we did this, one of the major tools we use, and it builds motivation, by the way. When somebody has that 7.5 or 8 number, or even a 9 number, with their motivation today. We like to build on that motivation, and we have a tool that really can build that, and it's called this hierarchy of values. Okay. And Joe thinks he created it. I had to inform him about 3 years ago that Voltaire actually did it about 1700 and actually had the name there. But Joe created the way you do it for recovery.
Okay. Well, that'd be fun. And also, so you know, the system that we're using to record the video, you can also do slideshows on here too. You can load up a slideshow if you wanted to and do that. Screen shares, anything like that. It's pretty handy.
Yeah, all you have to do is say, "I'd like to see a slideshow," and you lost me.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. PowerPoints were designed to put people to sleep.
I like this impromptu stuff.
I agree with you. Totally. Yeah, you're all right about that. Yeah, PowerPoints have always put me to sleep, and that's just the way it is. So, but yeah, just throw it out there. So that sounds good. I really appreciate you doing this. I'm excited about this. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to make a commitment. I'm not going to say I will. I'm going to do what I want to make a concerted effort to start attending some SMART meetings so I can become more familiar with all of this. I don't want to just be talking about it and not really have the actual practice of really being involved. I've only been to a handful of meetings online, and I have enjoyed them. And for me, it's not necessarily because I think I'm going to drink again, but for whatever reason, it's still important for me to stay in contact with a community of people in the recovery world and who have been recovered and have had this experience. And it's something I'm interested in. And I'm just at a point in my life where I need to expand on what I know and learn more and have new experiences. So
to give you an idea very quickly. Yes, I've had people that have come into our meetings. Actually, they brought other people, and they had long-term sobriety or recovery in either NA or AA, and they're sponsors, and they are sponsors, and they've come in and they've listened to some of our meetings, and they say, "Wow, never thought of things that way."
Yeah,
and they're actually using some of our SMART tools now, which with their sponsees, that it makes sense that they never even thought of it in that way.
Right.
So, I have a young lady that whenever she needs a spiritual answer, she calls her sponsor. When she wants a practical answer, she calls me.
Right. Cool.
So,
I like it.
It just depends on each individual. And about 30 to 35% of the people that come to a SMART meeting also do a 12-step.
Yeah, that's so cool too. And that's so important for people to know. We don't have to be in silos where you only do one thing. The world is, there are so many options available now. Use any option. There are book clubs, there are social media groups, there are meetings of all sorts for people. Like, I've done a podcast with people who just represent the restaurant and bar community, people in recovery who work in that field, just all kinds of different things. So yeah, I'm excited about this. That's good.
Yeah. And we'll bring other people on.